I think we're live. Giving it time just to make sure it's firing up, but yeah, that looks okay, I guess. Chat room, start letting me know for sure that I'm going. Okay, I'm going to assume that I'm going. Hello, everyone out there in Internetville. It's been a while. You there, Chris? Chris was here a second ago. Yeah, oh geez, what misadventures have we had getting to this point? I'm trying to think of how this all even started. We had it scheduled. And then I had a scheduling conflict and had to bow out, so I rescheduled it. And then that whole thing with the bogus strike happened, so I couldn't do it for another 7 days, so I scheduled another one. Then I got COVID 2.0, whatever it's called, AB.2. something, that new subvariant of Omicron. Hello, has everyone abandoned me? All right, I am seeing no one in the chat room, and I'm not hearing anything from Chris. We were talking just a minute ago. Is anyone watching, or am I just shouting into the wilderness, which is kind of what I usually do, so. Well, now, wait a minute. This says that I'm not broadcasting. Am I broadcasting or am I not? I don't know. I'm either broadcasting or I'm talking to myself, which is... And it is... Oh, it is set to private. How did it get set to private?
We live, sorry, my mom needed me.
This thing got set to private somehow. I was wondering why I wasn't seeing anyone in the chat. Okay, it's public now. Now is anyone on? I have no idea. I know I set the thing to public because I have a copy over the settings from the last one. Oh well, we're public now, although I don't know if anyone's watching yet. But how you doing, Chris?
I've been better.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I'm still not quite over this mess. I've got kind of that feeling where I'm hot and chilled at the same time. You know, just kind of lingering.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aha! Yeah, yes! I see JC in the chat, so we are broadcasting.
Yeah, some upper respiratory viruses are infamous for doing that. It's like you have a really high fever and you feel like...
You cut out there, Chris.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's like you get a really high fever and you're scorching and drowning in your own sweat. So, you know, you take off your blanket and all that, and then you're freezing to death.
Yeah, even without that, it's kind of at the same time. That's where I am at the moment. I don't have a fever, but it's just that hot and chill thing at the same time. I was trying to think about the misadventures that got here before I figured out that this thing was set to private for some reason. But we had it scheduled, and then I think I had a scheduling conflict, and it would have just been too hectic to do it. So I said, okay, we'll postpone it. Then I got that bogus strike against my account.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, funny thing about that, and I cannot get a response from Team YouTube on Twitter about this at all, but with that strike, I appealed. The appeal was granted, but they still didn't take off the strike. So I've got a strike till like August. And they haven't taken it on. I can't get but anyway, couldn't live stream for 7 days. Then after that, I got COVID 2.0. Yeah. Whatever the subvariant is called, AB.2. Something, whatever. It's not nice. One of the pharmaceutical companies, it wasn't one of the ones that had done one of the previous vaccines, but they said they were coming up with a vaccine, and this one has updated proteins, so it should work with Omicron.
Well, maybe you don't have COVID. Maybe you have monkeypox.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Honestly, something tells me that was just there. That was just there because literally they're running out of things to blame, to blame the economy on. First it was COVID, then it was the Russian-Ukraine war. Now it's like, listen, people are tired of that. No, they're not believing it. What are we going to do now? Monkeypox. Yeah, that's it.
And I haven't heard anything about that in days, so I'm guessing it fizzled out like all the others do. Monkeypox.
But in fact, people... It sounds scary, but it's actually not that dangerous of a virus.
Well, apparently it's bad if you get it. But it's kind of like Ebola. It's really bad if you get it, but it doesn't spread all that well. Although Ebola can actually spread. I think the R0 with that is 2. But with monkeypox, the R0 is something like between 0.3 and 0.5. So you basically start out with herd immunity.
Yeah.
So... I mean, like I've shown before, with herd immunity, you still get, the little, outbreaks here and there. But, it fizzles out. So someone will get infected, they'll infect the people around them, and then it'll fizzle out. And we see that with monkeypox every so often. It gets it, some people around them get it, and then it just fizzles. And I think that's what happened with this one. Rainbow Asteroids, how you doing? Fun fact, monkeypox does not come from monkeys.
Yeah, I remember hearing that. The only reason it got called monkeypox is because the virus was first discovered in monkeys, but...
Yeah. And of course, at that point, they had no idea where it came from.
Yeah. Yeah, if I recall correctly, there was a small outbreak that occurred in the United States, like in the 90s, and people at first thought, maybe they got it from monkeys, but no, they actually got it from exotic pets. Like prairie dogs.
Yeah, I think it is prairie dogs now that I think about it. But yeah, it's just the fact that it doesn't live in humans normally, and on rare occasions, like COVID, SARS, MERS, things like that. On rare occasions, they'll mutate the ability to survive in humans. Most of them don't even make humans sick, but with monkeypox, apparently it can jump over to humans temporarily and then just fizzles out because it can't survive that well in humans. It's not adapted for us. But yeah, they're acting like, oh, this is going to be the new pandemic, and everyone who was knowledgeable was saying, don't be so stupid.
Yeah.
So I wonder what they're going to come up with next now that people have basically stopped caring about the Russo-Ukrainian war. And then, they had COVID fatigue a long time ago. They're trying to make a big thing about Jan 6 with their huge, big congressional committee thing, which is a joke from start to finish, and hardly anyone's watching it, and no one cares.
I had to leave an atheist server that I was on, because there's this one YouTuber called Telltale Atheist who normally I have a lot, he does a lot of good videos of debunking religious bullshit, but he is out to lunch when it comes to politics, and he will not. And unfortunately, he's one of those people where, he'll turn on his skeptical brain, for religion, but the moment politics enters, he turns that off and he just listens to whatever the state says because, well, they were democratically elected and all that. So
yeah, it's amazing how many of them that's the case with.
Yeah, and he's in the belief system that Jan 6 was a riot. Was a riot. He also thinks that QAnon is a cult. When they're in all honesty, from what I'm understanding, like there's only a handful of people that genuinely believe in QAnon. Most of the people in it are just, they're either trolling or they're soft QAnon skeptics. Like they're skeptical of the government, but they don't believe in, that it's run by satanic aliens or anything.
What was it called back in 2016? Disrupt J20, when they were trying to stop Donald Trump from being sworn in? Yeah. I think that's what it was called. It was called something like that. If you think the Jan 6 was an insurrection, tell me why Disrupt J20 wasn't. Because all the same stuff was there, or even worse, they were actually smashing things up, setting fire to police cars.
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you this. Yeah, I mean, and it's pretty funny because so many people, think there was a conspiracy theory within the Capitol Police because, the police let them in. It's because people, guess what? The congressional building, it's a public building. Therefore, as long as you're acting, lawfully, you can't be denied access to it.
You can be denied access to certain areas to it, and apparently a lot of them got into areas they ought not to have been in. But yeah, but also they only had like a handful of Capitol Police on duty, a lower number than they normally have.
Yeah.
And like one of the things they were saying was Donald Trump refused to send in the National Guard, and it was either Viva Frei or Robert Gouveia found the thing from the DC mayor, I think it was. Trump had said, hey, we'll provide National Guard, and the DC mayor said, no, we're not letting you send in the National Guard.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want to know why the adversarial process is so important, and you want to know why due process is so important, and why it's so important, to be able to cross-examine witnesses and everything, just look at what they've been doing with the J6 thing when none of that is in play.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just asking stupid. There's one witness they were asking, oh, well, of course, we started off these committee meetings with a prayer, and we recited the Lord's Prayer and all the things. Can you tell us, how did your spiritualism, how did your Christianity sound today? And the witness, I even forget who it was, but he was talking about how, yes, he had opened his Bible to a certain passage to read it for inspiration. It's like, oh my God, this is a fucking joke.
Yeah, not as much of a bigger joke as that one lady, that tried to accuse that one that one lady of the Heritage Foundation of perjury, even though it wasn't perjury. God. Yeah.
Yeah, that was on the previous podcast, not the one yesterday, but the one before.
Yeah,
I did that one. Yeah,
and I'm just thinking, perjury for what? It's not like it's not like she was testifying, and it's not like she was giving testimony to Congress, and that is done under oath. Oh.
So that is under the penalty of perjury. But she didn't lie. She was trying to explain why she didn't lie, and they wouldn't let her.
Yep.
But it was like I was watching that first night because they were saying, we're going to show you never before seen video of it. And this is what a lot of people have been wanting. Just show us the videos of it, because apparently, the FBI has, all these thousands of hours of video, about it. And so I was looking to see what it was. And it wasn't anything new. You know what it was? It was this really slickly edited together. I mean, they got a professional editor to do this, or a professional filmmaker or someone to do this. And it was just all slickly edited together and overlapping audio and interspersed with, things about Trump and other things that didn't even happen on that day. And I mean, it's just propaganda.
Yeah, it's kind of like what the government does, when they finally say it's like, okay, by the popular demand of the people, of the people. We are finally going to release declassified information to prove once and for all we did nothing wrong. And then like 90% of the documents blacked out.
Yeah,
and when
they do
people
stuff
ask
like
why
that
is
all the
it
time.
yeah, and people ask why is it blacked out, it's like, oh, that's for privacy reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no transparency with this or anything.
Yeah. I think there should be a rule that says if you are a politician, anything you do that is political in nature, it can't it's you forfeit the right to privacy for stuff like that. You are allowed privacy for really personal stuff, but like if it's politically involved, like if you're telling people to do something, you forfeit any right to be private,
And I mean, I can tell you because I've been an editor now for like 15 years or something like that. If you doubt the ability of editors to manipulate you, not only emotionally, but also to just manipulate your interpretation of things like people's feelings or your own perception of what's going on, look up the Kuleshov effect.
How do you pronounce that?
Kuleshov, I think.
Kuleshov
Every editor
effect.
knows about this. It was Lev Kuleshov was a Russian filmmaker like back in the 19-teens. And he showed this to people. He had just a shot he had made of a guy's face with a neutral expression. And so he showed like a plate full of food and cut back to the guy, and the audience thought he was hungry. He, did like a beautiful woman and then cut back to the guy and they thought he was horny, and he did like a, dead child in a coffin, cut back to him and they thought he was grieving. Same shot of the guy.
Oh.
Just in a neutral expression. Alfred Hitchcock did a version of it where it was a shot of him, he's looking, and then he smiles. And so you have the shot of him looking, and you cut to a couple of small children playing on a playground. You cut back to him, and he smiles. And he's this kind, grandfatherly type figure. Does the same thing again. You see him, you cut to a woman in a bikini, and you cut back to him, and he smiles, and now he's a dirty old man. Same footage of Hitchcock, but because of the context in which you've cut it, it actually alters the way you see it.
Yep.
And it's this way with audio too, because, when they put in the music and they put in, audio that wasn't there from the time, but audio of someone else talking or whatever, it can actually affect how you see it. How are you doing, Executioner? I'm not hearing anything from you. All right, maybe he's still getting on. But anyway, oh, there you are. Hey. But like if you're making a movie and you've got, a cheap prop, maybe you've got, say, a gun that's just like a plastic airsoft gun or something like that. And the actor is using it and manipulating it. And of course, what the mic's picking up is just the cheap plastic, and it kind of looks like cheap plastic, and you can tell. Well, what you do is you only use the dialogue from the shoot, and you put in everything else. If you put in like the sounds, like if you just hold, like a vice grip is one thing that can make a lot of those metal sounds. You just futz with that in front of the microphone, in sync to the guy moving the gun around.
Foley.
Foley. And when he racks the slide, you put on the sound of a slide being racked and things like that. And you have that sound of a real gun or of solid metal or something like that. It actually affects the way you see it. It doesn't look like this cheap plastic gun anymore. It looks like this, this quality metal gun, because, the neurology of it is fascinating.
Creating an illusion.
Yeah, well, see what
Actually,
happens in your what happens in your brain is your visual cortex sees what it sees, but then your association cortex says, "Well, that's a gun," and it actually talks back to your visual cortex and says, okay, well, that's a gun. Make it look like a gun. And your visual cortex says, well, I think this is plastic. And it's like, maybe it's plastic. But then it gets from your audio cortex the sound of the metal. And your association cortex says, well, now, wait a minute. I'm hearing metal in sync with that. That must be a metal gun. Talks back to your visual cortex and says, make that look more like a metal gun. And it literally changes how you see it.
Yeah, you can watch movies without the sound effects, and it totally sounds different. Like the Dark Knight trilogy, you listen to everything without the sound effects, and it's like, wow, I would have never expected the Batmobile to sound
no joke.
like that.
There's been cases where they've removed the music, from a lot of famous films. And a lot of people say, wow, without the music to this particular scene, and I normally like this scene's incredibly boring. It's just people talking.
Yeah, it's all about.
Well, with 2001, I watched a documentary. Stanley Kubrick originally wanted he commissioned a guy to do the score for the film, but he was just listening to just his record collection one day, and the music sounded way better, the records he had, so he was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go with that.
Yeah, you can get the soundtrack for it. It's not that great. It's a lot better with what he had. But yeah, all of that stuff, and like going back to the gun thing, if you just have it as like, the normal, semi-auto pistol slide being racked, it's one thing. But if you mix it in really loud, or if you mix in something like a rifle bolt or something like that, you can actually make the gun seem much more threatening. And it's all about, painting the picture with sound, as they call it.
Yep.
Yeah. And what we're actually talking about, exec, before you came in, we're talking about those Jan 6 hearings and how they did this real professional edit job on the videos they were showing instead of just showing it the way it happened. Yep. That's all done to manipulate you.
So they added sound effects to it.
Yeah, it's another.
They didn't add sound effects to it, but they were playing audio from someone else talking from Trump's speech or from someone else's. They were putting in audio from something else, and the way they select which audio to put in.
Wouldn't that lead somebody to associate something with something that isn't related whatsoever?
Absolutely. That was the whole point. It was propaganda.
So if you put Trump over it, then people associate Jan 6 with Trump. Okay, I got it.
Yeah,
that's manipulative.
Idea. That's the whole idea. And if you say, if you put him saying something like "fight for your country" was one of them, how many politicians have said "fight for your country"? I mean, they all say that. But I'm going to say "fight for your country" at the same time.
Politicians have said "fight"?
Yeah, but if you do that at the same moment that you show them, busting the windows on the Capitol building, they're going to associate that completely differently.
Yeah, that's what I hate. Yeah, that's what I hate about it. I especially hate it when they do it in documentaries, because there's so many famous documentaries that people say, oh, I saw that thing and it was so terrible and it made me want to support a cause. Then you later learn that it was actually a scene that had nothing to do with the cause and it was taken completely out of context.
Yeah. Well,
they do it with Vietnam War documentaries too.
A documentary is a form of storytelling. And you're going to get the documentarian's point of view about what happened. When you're watching a documentary, you're not seeing truth. It's fact-based, but it's still using storytelling and editing techniques, to make you see things a certain way or feel a certain way.
Kind of like Ken Burns' Civil War.
Yeah, I mean, he was a master at that.
Who was that again?
Ken Burns.
Yeah.
Tim who?
Ken Burns.
Oh,
Ken.
Okay.
He
has an
did
effect
like
named
the
after him.
bicycle documentary.
He has an effect named after him, the Ken Burns effect. He'll be the first to say he didn't invent it, but he kind of popularized it, where instead of showing, like if you don't have video of something happen, but you have a picture, instead of just showing the picture, you kind of zoom into the picture or pan around it, to get some movement in there.
You can kind of do cutouts.
And focus in
You
on
can do
areas you want.
cutouts too.
Yeah, that's called the Ken Burns effect.
So basically people think, what does that mean? What is this? Does this person play a significance when the truth is the person that's being shown to, they're no more important than anyone else in there, huh?
Well, I mean, they might be. It all depends on how honest the documentarian's being.
Yeah.
What you could do is you have different planes. I mean, you could do this in Blender, but you kind of create different levels of planes. Like you have the background image, then the guy who on another layer, then whatever you need on the top layer, and you kind of just move the layers to kind of. It's what Disney basically did with the motion plane camera.
That's why I hate Michael Moore's documentaries, because it's like I've met so many people that like, aren't very political and actually agree with some of the stuff Michael Moore, is advocating for, but they all agree that was a terrible thing he did, because they're like, anyone with any knowledge of editing knows that he's staging everything.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is with Sicko, that movie, he only went to, and I think Freedom Tunes pointed this out, or a couple other people, Reason Magazine, they pointed out that he just went to the tourist hospital.
Yep, he went to.
Yeah, John Stossel did a good expose of that.
Yeah, there are many, Cuban exiles and refugees from Cuba, one of whom John Stossel interviewed, who was a former Cuban doctor himself, said the place Michael Moore went to, that's the hospital that's reserved for tourists and visiting politicians. The average Cuban, if they do get health care, they're just thrown into a small shanty room and they're just left there.
Yeah.
He is very dishonest, where he'll go, and I think this was, he knew, and he released the documentary after the whole announcement came out, but basically during the Bowling for Columbine documentary, Charlton Heston was showing the early stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, and Michael Moore did an interview, and then afterwards, when the announcement came out that Charlton Heston had Alzheimer's, etc., he didn't edit that out of the film. He left it in there.
I mean, here's the thing: if you're doing a documentary, or something like that, not if you're like, submitting evidence into court, which is not what the Jan 6 committee is doing, but if you're editing together a documentary, you have to edit. It's just. You just have to do it. It's part of the process. But all editing is manipulative. All editing, whether you're making, a film, a work of fiction, whether you're making a documentary, no matter what you're doing, whether if you're editing together your home videos, you are engaging in manipulation of some sort. So if you're trying to make
montages manipulate time. Montages, long cuts.
It's another good example of emotional manipulation. Those commercials, for animal rescue shelters, because they show you, those puppies and kitties, and they play the sad music, and you're like, oh, that poor thing must be traumatized. But I work at a doggy daycare, and I know from firsthand experience, a lot of dogs just naturally look like that.
Oh yeah, that's one of their survival instincts. They look like that. Say, I'm pathetic, and you want to take care of me. My dog is very good at that.
I read Walter Block's Defending the Undefendable, and there's a good chapter in there about advertising, and a lot of people tend to say advertising is evil, etc. But the thing is, everything, whether you're talking about a film, a book, a documentary, whatever, it's edited because it's trying to get people to buy the product. If it's not edited in a way that people's attention spans are only so there. So if you have a commercial and it's just totally boring and nobody cares, nobody's going to buy the product. But if you edit it properly, then
if you don't edit you're only going to make people feel one way, and that's bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a perfectly good
And
example.
Walter Block.
I mean, a pretty good
sorry.
example, and Steven Spielberg mentioned this, Jaws. And Steven Spielberg mentioned this multiple times. His famous movie Jaws. If you were to remove a lot of the soundtracks and editing, Jaws is an extremely boring movie. If you were to remove all that.
Yeah, I mean that's true with a lot of movies.
Yeah. And the thing is,
we do it.
And it's not like, Steven Spielberg, he mentioned that like in a documentary about making it, and he talked about how it's like, listen, we have to be very careful with how we edit this movie, because if we don't, it's going to come off as boring and stupid.
Well, and you've got,
we do it.
You've got, you've got an incredibly fake looking shark.
Oh yeah.
That shark is just total fake-a-rooney. But through things like lighting, color grading, the movement, the music, the context, everything you're intercutting with, you can kind of make the audience not notice that. And an obviously fake shark, if you look at a picture of the shark is obviously fake. You cut it like that and it looks real.
Yeah. Well, and another good example about Jaws, that shows how editing can make even a cheap effect look scary, is the scene where Hooper finds the deceased head. That head looks pretty fake, and honestly, if you were to just look at it at face value, with it muted, it's actually not that scary of a scene. The reason why it scares people is because the moment that head appears, there's that loud ding sound and whatnot.
Yeah.
The moment you go back to rewatch it is when you realize the fakeness, but when you first see it and the music, it actually scares you.
Yeah.
Take one of the greatest scenes in horror, the shower scene from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Look at it without the sound. Look at it without the sound.
Yeah, it's
without
stupid
the sound,
because
it is terrible. It's a woman showering. The guy comes up. The knife. The knife doesn't even touch her. You've got chocolate syrup going down the drain, but you add in the cutting, you add in the tense music and all the read and all the and everything else, all of the sounds that were added in, and you got one of the greatest scenes in all of horror.
Yep. Oh yeah,
I think when you watch 2001, you kind of notice that a lot of the things, when you pause on them, you kind of realize, oh, that's a model. But when things are moving and when things, when you're not, it's that suspension of disbelief is what really kicks in. Like Jupiter, how they did it was just a long exposure of a 180 photo, but it is so quick that you don't notice it, but you can still see the scan lines.
The impressive thing I think is impressive about that movie is when they made it, when they were doing the scenes, in orbit around Earth, the Apollo craft had not yet taken any pictures of Earth, so they had no idea what Earth looked like from space. They were guessing. And
they got almost
pretty
close,
darn
but
close.
a little too blue.
It was a little a little too much, the blue refraction in the atmosphere, the scattering. But I mean, considering that they never actually saw it. Here's something else. It was originally, following the book, it was originally supposed to take place around Saturn. And Trumbull, Douglas Trumbull, the effects guy, was totally ready to do Saturn. And no one had ever seen Saturn's rings up close to know what they look like. And Kubrick said, the rings are flat. They look fake. This isn't working. Let's just make it Jupiter instead of Saturn. Well, then Trumbull followed that up with a movie of his own called Silent Running, which did take place around Saturn. And so he made Saturn look the way he wanted it to look. And then a few years later, the Voyager probes send back to Earth the photos of what Saturn actually looks like, and he got it so close. The thing that Kubrick thought was unrealistic is almost exactly how it really looks.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, you know, realistically speaking, like so many people talk about how it's like that thing looks totally fake, but believe it or not, in real life, that actually is what the thing looks like. You know, fun fact, a perfectly good example, because I was watching this, you know, on a documentary one time about Indiana Jones. The scene, you know, where they have the spiders, they actually had to trick the spiders into moving because real life spiders don't move a whole lot, and in fact, you know, it literally makes no sense. You know.
Yeah.
It makes no sense for them to be moving all the time because they're ambush predators, and part of their job is to be camouflaged.
There is a thing
Well,
in
if
a lot
you
of
need a design, if you need a design for a monster, just look to nature. You can find some very weird stuff.
and for aliens too, yeah.
Another
Nature has
perfectly
things that
another
look a lot more alien than a lot of aliens in science fiction.
yeah.
There's a thing in a lot of CGI forums and a lot of gaming forums where people take pictures of things in the real world that come across that don't look realistic. They look like bad CGI or, you know, cheap CGI from a game, except it's an actual picture of the real world.
Yeah.
Like you have a shadow. I saw one just the other day. It was a shadow from a tiled roof that was down there, and it looked, you know, pixelated and jaggy like a lot of cheap game engines do. They make the shadows lower resolution, except it was an actual picture. You know,
Also, going back to Jaws, it actually reminds me of this one funny moment I was reading about when I was watching the making of the Jaws documentary, was the scene where they find the remains of the girl, when he asked his stage crew to get him a fake arm. You know, they got this, you know, thing that made it look plasticky and all that, and Steven Spielberg was angry, saying this thing looks fake. It totally looks like it looks too obviously plastic. However, one of the consultants, you know, they had, you know, in charge of special effects, who actually delved into medical field, actually says that's actually what a lot of limbs look like when they're on the sand. When they're on the sand exposed to the sun for a while, they develop this shine onto them and they look plasticky. And he's like, I don't care. It looks fake. The audience is going to think it's fake.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's about how it looks, not how it would really be.
Yep.
But that's like what you get from a lot of the people who say we never landed on the moon, and they go anomaly hunting. Oh, look at what these shadows are doing. And I mean, you can find all sorts of pictures in the real world of shadows doing exactly that, you know.
Oh, yeah.
All sorts of things.
You know, it's another thing that happened that goes back to the whole real life, you know, looks fake, is one time I was at the zoo with my mom, and my mom, you know, were at a crocodile, and she kept insisting that the alligators they had were fake because they were not moving and they were standing still. It didn't even look like they were breathing. Yet here's the thing. I've seen, you know, those, you know, like live shows with Jimmy Kimmel or whatever, where they have animal experts on and they bring a crocodile or alligator, and you can see the crocodile moving, breathing, and all that, it's walking there. But the moment it gets relaxed and it's all calm, it just stands absolutely still, and you can't even tell it's breathing unless you look really, really closely. And many times that's what the cameraman has to do.
Well, remember, they're ambush predators. They don't really move unless they're ready to strike.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, but if I recall correctly, that's what one animal expert told them too. You know, they're like, are they okay? They're not moving at all. Are they alive? It's like, and he's like, oh yeah, they're totally fine. You know, they're ambush predators. This is what they do in the wild. They barely move at all because that's what they do. They sit on, you know, the side of water, and they and they sit absolutely still, making only the bare minimum movement. And an animal comes by to get a drink of water, and then they have their meal.
That's like everyone's like, you know, how can you possibly, I think there have even been movies like that where, you know, you've got an alligator chasing someone out of the, you know, out of the river or whatever. It's like, they don't do that. If they don't catch you within a couple of seconds, they're going to go back into the water and, you know, find some easier prey.
Yeah, that's another thing too that people feel. Oh, sorry.
I watched Planet Earth, that whole documentary series, and a lot of the stuff is very good, but when you look at real, like, nature footage, like, it wasn't, for the sake of it's not made for a documentary, it's a lot more boring because they're just snippets of action going on, and if it wasn't that way, well, who in the hell would watch a 2-hour nature documentary without a story?
Yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing too about real life being kind of boring. Is that a lot of people like when they portray wilderness scenes, they portray it as being full of animals and all that, and like they're walking around and all that. And in real life, it's not like that. And people are like, well, that's just because there's humans out there, and animals hide when humans are around. And they've done things where they've taken cameras out there, live cameras, and humans leave, and that's it. They leave and they don't come back there for weeks, if not days. And even with the cameras, it takes hours before you find a squirrel show up.
Yeah, I just all of a sudden had all of these chats show up on my screen. I have no idea why. So I think I'm missing context for a lot of these earlier ones.
Yeah,
has there so far been any
used to go out in my
convictions? I think there have been a couple of felony pleas, but I don't know if there have actually been any convictions. There have been some misdemeanor convictions, but I'm not sure about felonies. I think there were a couple who pleaded to felonies and ended up regretting it because it turns out it's not really anything.
Yeah. I used to go out in my yard and there's a lot of woods back there, and I was always afraid, there could be coyotes out there. And I'm like, well, the likelihood of that is not as much, but hey, better to carry your gun and need it than not have it.
Better to have and not need than need and not have, yeah. Yeah, I don't know why it happened with that, but just so everyone knows, the chat is just a capture from my screen on the chat. So I didn't see any of these in my chat window until it showed up on your screen. So, like a couple people were trying to let me know, hey, the chat's not showing up on the screen. Well, it didn't show up in my chat either, so I didn't see that. And it's still not showing up in Twidget. I don't know how. Can you appeal a guilty plea? Sometimes you can, yes. That was what Michael Flynn was doing, if you remember.
Remember, a 9mm will blow. A 9mm will blow your lung out, but a 22, you might have a chance.
Yeah, and it's also not true that pleading guilty means you confess to the crime. That was settled a long time ago with the Supreme Court from a case that originated from North Carolina, and I forget exactly how it went, but this guy took a plea deal, and the judge was trying to make him confess and said, well, if you don't confess, I'm not going to let you take the deal because you're only going to plead guilty if you say you actually did it. And he followed it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you do not have to confess to take a guilty plea.
Yeah, it reminds me of South Park, the toilet paper episode, where Butters gets grounded for making a false confession, and it's like, well, he's under arrest for TPing a house. A house, he confessed. Butters couldn't have done it because he was with us at home. Butters, what do you have to say yourself making false confessions to the police? Well, I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. They kept me in a room for several hours. I wasn't allowed to sleep, and then they gave me this weird drug which made me feel all funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not supposed to be interrogating a minor without a parent or guardian present either. So.
Yeah. Oh, that too, yeah.
Have they on a kind of a related note, I've heard a lot of those crime shows, they'll have somebody, they don't want to take the DNA test, so they'll give them a soda or something, they'll throw it out in the trash, and then the cop goes, gets it, and then does the test. Has that ever been found to be unconstitutional?
I don't think so. It is when it's testimonial. When you say, I don't want to say something, but then they do something like, in some other way trick you to giving something up. And like if you want to say, hey, I'm not talking without my lawyer, and then they do something to surprise you or something like that, to try and scare you into saying something. They've said that is, but your DNA isn't testimonial, although I think it should be, It's kind of
because
interesting that the contents of your mind are protected, but the contents of your stomach are fair game.
Yeah, I watched that once and I was like, wait a minute. So they can't force him to do it, but if he has a soda, he throws it out, then that's totally fair game. That's just ludicrous.
I don't think that's ever been challenged.
Well, the sad reality is that if you make an accusation like that, the judge is obviously going to say, well, do you have proof of that?
And they actually go on to admit it. They admit it in the crime shows.
Yeah.
They go, we found the killer by doing this, and we took his DNA from the trash.
That's just why, that's why, even though entrapment happens all the time and there's evidence of it, it rarely gets, brought up, because every time it is, the judge often sides with the cops saying, oh, that's not entrapment. That's just standard, police procedure.
Well, I think this is coming up on Thursday. It's already up for the supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar, but I've got a video coming up about the red flag laws and a story about, it's the thing about, the crazy ex, and she shows up with, with a bruise on her eye and says, he hit me, and he wasn't even in the state at the time, and he could prove he was innocent and all that, and all this, trying to get it done. And so he had asked the DA, is like, well, what about the perjury charges? He was like, what perjury charges? Like, you're not going to charge her with perjury? Why would we charge her with perjury? She lied. She lied under oath. She provably lied. She lied to the court. She committed perjury, and the DA is like, oh, no, we don't do that.
False police report.
Yeah. It's another thing that I think really needs to be done. Because I think this really needs to be done because it's still a nightmare for people. If someone is convicted of a crime and they're sent to jail, and it's discovered that, the thing that led to their conviction was seedy or unconstitutional at best, the policy should be that person is automatically pardoned and they're let go immediately. It shouldn't be, oh, well, now you can get a retrial then.
I think if you deliberately and knowingly falsely accuse someone of a crime the way this woman did, you should get the same penalty they would have gotten if they'd been convicted. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, I
think that should also be the case. I think that should also be the case if there's like a cop that violated your constitutional rights, to frame you up for a crime you didn't commit. The cop should get your sentence.
You know what happened? You know what would happen? You know what would happen if we made that a constitutional amendment? Every state would ban the death would abolish the death penalty.
Oh, too quick to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what shocked me is I was reading into Jim Crow, and I was reading into the civil rights movement, like the history, and there was a case of a young boy who was he was 13, I believe, and somebody had falsely accused him of murder or rape, and the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually desided with the state, and the kid was executed.
Oh yeah.
Yep, there have been plenty of cases like that.
Yeah.
We know for a fact there have been innocent people who were executed.
Mm-hmm.
The guy they executed for killing the Lindbergh baby was almost certainly innocent.
Yeah.
There was a guy, I think I covered this in the podcast, in Texas. He was arrested, tried, executed for murdering his family. They had died in a fire, and he was lucky to get out with his life. They said they said that he had started the fire, and as evidence, like the pattern that the fire meant that he had, put gasoline around everywhere. Basically, every fire expert ever was saying, no, that's not what it looks like. That's a normal fire.
And not to mention, they claimed that he was, satanic and psychopathic because he was a fan of Def Leppard and Metallica.
Yeah. Well, and they had even asked the prosecutor, who at that point was, I think, the Attorney General of Texas, that because he was like, well, he's all satanic and everything. It was like, well, even if you had proof positive right now he was innocent, would you work to set him free? He was like, no, because he's a Satanist. He deserves to die.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Shane, is ballistic forensics pseudoscience? Like how?
From what I heard, it largely is for the most part.
I don't think
Because
it's fundamentally. I don't think it's fundamentally pseudoscience, but it's nowhere near the hard and certain science that they make it out to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like collecting. It's kind of like fingerprint data. It's like, yes, it is true that no two fingerprints are alike that we know of, but the reality is that's only if you get a crystal perfect fingerprint and you study it for hours and compare it to another one, and even then, like I said, you have to study it for hours. The reality is most fingerprints you get are smudged.
And even then, there's an ethics question of whenever they do experiments with AI in regards to forensic science. It's like, have you trained the AI to recognize a variety of things? Because it could be that you just trained it with, I don't know, white people. And when you finally apply it to somebody who's black, well, the AI hasn't been trained to deal with that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who knows anything about AI and is it all reasonable would say, no, do not use it for actual evidence in court. I mean, you can't cross-examine it. It gets stuff wrong all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It mistakes a wolf for a person. I think there was a story about that.
By the way, while we're talking about it, know that Google AI is not sentient.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, but there was one case where there's a picture of a panda. It's obviously a picture of a panda. They show it to the AI. It was like, okay, the AI says it's a panda. Then they put just a little bit of noise over it. Not even all that much. Not even to where you would look at it and say, gee, that's a noisy picture. Just a little bit of noise over it. And then all of a sudden the AI thought it was a gibbon.
Mm. Also, going back to the whole thing about what I said earlier about how a person should be, if it's found that, the evidence leading their conviction was shoddy and unconstitutional at best, they should be instantly released, because I've heard there are people, who are not even on death row, but they're serving life in prison, even though all the evidence, against them was proven to be bunk. And why is that? Because the court didn't pardon them. They're just like, okay, we'll entitle you to a second trial, but they either can't afford the second trial, or every time they try, it keeps getting delayed.
Well, and that's the problem.
There are tens of dozens of cases like that.
Yeah.
Just making them go through that can bankrupt them, just from all the lawyers' fees and the court fees and missing work and getting fired from work. And
I know, I went through that personally. A lot of times, and I think you said it before, in many cases, the process itself is the punishment, is the real punishment, Yep. There's like so many,
in this video that's coming up on Thursday, this crazy ex put this guy through, ended up, in addition to losing the work and all the time and damage to the reputation and everything else, it ended up costing him $2,500, and that's only because he was friends with the partner at the law firm. If he hadn't been, it would have cost him over $10,000. And it didn't cost her anything to lie.
Yep.
To come into court with a fake bruise and lie about it.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the time it took him to, get his guns back and everything. And, oh, look, hey, where's my shotgun? Oh, there was no shotgun. Yeah, there is. It's right here on the inventory. Oh, well, we don't know what happened to it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one of the cops got the shotgun.
It's fucking rusted.
Yeah. Oh,
it's rusted, or it's been rained on.
Or someone took it for themselves or sold it at a police auction. There's been cases like that, where they've arrested people for using rental car, and the person was caught in a rental car, so the car was taken for evidence. So they contact the person that the criminal rented it from, and they're like, okay, can we get the car back? And they're like, oh yeah. It's like, can we get our car back? And they're like, oh yeah, you'll get it back, once we do all the processing. Okay, so they look up, everything's processed, the person's been convicted. Okay, where's my car? What car?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They pulled that crap to Kim.com. They had seized all of his stuff. They seized couches. He had this really nice editing suite, that they took, and they just kept it this is evidence. We're not releasing it. This is evidence. But I'm going to get it back right now. They made these assurances to the court. Oh no, it's being taken care of. It's in this, temperature controlled storage unit and everything's going to be fine. He finally gets it back and everything was ruined. The couch had been eaten up and covered in moss. The editing suite had been ruined by, humidity and all sorts of things.
Mega Upload?
Yeah, the Mega Upload guy, yeah.
Wow. There was a case with Katrina where they confiscated hundreds of guns from people. And when people went to go get their guns back at the police stations, they had been put in garbage barrels where they had been rusting for about a year. And it took people a long time just to get their guns back.
Yep.
I've also heard,
and they're trying to tell us that these red flag laws won't be abused.
I've heard stories, of people, their cars, get seized, because they think there might be contraband, and the police literally tear the car apart. They destroy it all. They wreck everything, and then they find nothing, and then they either don't fix the car or they do a shoddy job with fixing the car.
Oh, Amanda Knox. Yeah, JC, that's another one. She was actually, first of all, she's obviously innocent to anyone who looks at the facts of the case, but she was actually acquitted in the Italian court, found not guilty, and then they said, oh, we want to go back on that and try her again, and the Italian court said, okay. Here in America, if you're acquitted, that's it. As soon as a judge or a jury says not guilty, that's it. There's no appeals, there's no do-overs, there's no nothing. You're not guilty, that's it. Apparently not in Italy.
Though there is a thing I've heard, granted that some state and federal governments will do, and it's really sickening. It's because this actually happened to a landowner. I saw it on the John Stossel special. Everything's illegal. It's where the government will try to press a criminal charge on you, and you're found not guilty. Everything's dropped and all that. Then later you'll get a call from the government saying, yeah, congratulations, you were found not guilty in criminal court, but we still think you're a criminal, so we're going to file a legal suit against you.
Yeah, a civil suit, or they'll say,
civil.
Oh, well, that was state court. We're getting you in federal court like that, so double jeopardy doesn't apply.
Yeah, that happened to that one.
As far as Italy is concerned, keep in mind that is the country that convicted geologists for failing to predict an earthquake.
Yeah, it's like Mother Nature. It's like I can't predict, nature.
Yeah,
it's kind of like what people are like when they get mad at the weatherman because he says something and all that. It's like, listen, that's all our instruments say, but here's the thing: weather can change on a whim. I mean, people always talk about, creating a weather dominator. That's impossible.
So weather dominator.
Yeah, and what they had actually said, there's like, well, they told us there wasn't going to be an earthquake. They're like, that's not what we said. We said that there was no reason to think that there was any more chance of an earthquake now than there would be at any other time, which was true. But that's not to say, that an earthquake wasn't coming, because you can't predict those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I know.
I know
why they did that, though. It's because people.
Thanks for stopping by, exec.
Because people died in that earthquake. They all get emotional, and they want to blame something.
Yeah. Well, and as far as
Yeah.
the weather is concerned, they think it might be literally impossible to ever predict it more than like 3 or 4 weeks out, because this all has to do with uncomputable numbers and quantum mechanics and things like that. But it's just the fact that if you look at the algorithms that are used to predict earthquakes, you have not earthquakes, to predict the weather. There's so many opportunities for uncomputable numbers to come in and mess it up that there just may not be the information literally in the universe to say what's going to happen more than a few weeks out.
Yeah.
And you're actually better off just taking that taking the weather on that day for like the last 10 years, plotting a trend and making a prediction that way than by trying to predict with what's happening now.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned red flag laws. I think I saw this one comic one time, and it was making fun of, that meme, where a guy proves a pretty good point, and in response they throw him out a window. There's one thing like that where it's like just like Megan's law, these red flag laws will prevent criminals, and it'll let us know where criminals are, and it'll stop us from doing their crimes. And one person asks, I have a question though, what if the person committing the crimes is a first-time offender, or they've never been caught before? How are these laws going to stop them? And they just throw them out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I saw that with the debate, with when people were defending Megan's law, and it's like, and I just brought it up and no one wanted to answer. It's like, well, okay, well, what if there's, a child predator out there? But here's the thing: he's either never been caught before, or he doesn't have a criminal record. How is Megan's law going to stop him?
Yeah, that's the thing. People are all about like, oh, the high recidivism among child predators. There actually isn't.
Yeah.
You have a much higher rate of recidivism, among gang members than you do among child predators.
I mean, it would probably be
usually for most of them, they're not like the pedophile who's just looking for as many kids as they can. There's someone who's just attracted to one child, and that's the only one they're interested in.
And also, am I the only one that finds it ironic that Megan's law was signed by Bill Clinton?
Yeah.
I mean, it would probably be a dick move, but if I had a time machine and the technology to do so, I would love to go back in time, track down Bill Clinton, videotape all, the sexual, aggressions and crimes he committed. Then during the signing of Megan's law, I'm going to show it to everyone, and it's just going to be like, wait a minute. We're passing a law to protect people from sexual predators, and it's being signed by a sexual predator.
Well, I mean, it's no different from, if you remember Pastor Ted Haggard, who was the biggest voices about, the gays are so horrible, we need to stop the gays. And it turns out the whole time he was having sex with male prostitutes.
Yeah. I make that joke in some forums I'm on, because there's an extreme hatred for the furry fandom and all that, and I've seen some admins on some websites go on and on about how much they hate furries, and I'm like, something tells me you probably secretly like that stuff and you do. It's like, why would I say that? Well, it's just like those pastors that are like oh, gays are evil, they're sinful, they're the ultimate evil, and then it's later discovered they're caught soliciting sex from male prostitutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how it is. Beware of the people who are complaining about it the loudest. The ones who were yelling the loudest about how there's child predators everywhere and we got to stop the child predator. Maybe you want to watch them closely when they're near your kid.
Yeah. Yeah, Yeah, it's just... Yeah, it's projection. Yeah.
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 None of these are showing up in Twidget. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Because normally I can pick out like a chat to show up in Twitch. I haven't gotten anything since the Amanda Knox chat. I don't know if they've just gone silent or if it stopped showing up again.
Yeah. I will say, even though it's not a good movie, it's one film that, in hindsight, is actually has a really funny joke because it is so typical of a politician. It's from the live action How the Grinch Stole Christmas movie, where the mayor claims that there's a law in place that says the Grinch can't be nominated for for the chairmeister, and when Cindy Lou Who asks, where does it say that? He looks at the law and says, well, it's very deep. It's a really long law book, but I can assure you what's in there. Because how many times have we seen that politician say you're breaking a law, and when you ask what law did I break, it's like, well, hey, ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of those videos you did about, the whole I smell marijuana, and I posted a comment saying, and you know what happens when you point out the fallacy of drug sniffing dogs and how I smell marijuana is not an excuse, and you're not going to let him touch your car without a warrant. What happens then? You're under arrest for obstruction of justice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or you're arrested for resisting arrest, and then you ask the court, well, what was I being arrested for to begin with that I was supposedly resisting? Oh, that's irrelevant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, if I recall correctly, resisting arrest only applies if there's actually a warrant for your arrest,
Or they have probable cause and they're actually trying to arrest you for something and you resist that. But there are so many people who were just charged with resisting arrest without being charged with anything that they were being arrested for originally.
Yeah. And that's another thing too with obstruction of justice. People contrary to what police tell you obstruction does not apply to lying to the police and all that. It's things like destroying evidence, they have, let's say, that you're suspected of committing fraud, and there's a piece of paper that they're looking for, and they have a warrant for it, and they're saying, okay, we have the warrant. You have to give us that document that shows, you're committing fraud. And you're like, oh, well, you see, I was going to get it, and I slipped, and it accidentally fell into my paper shredder. That's obstruction.
Now, let's see. I'm seeing them in Twidget now, but I can't make them show up on the thing. Everything just stopped working on me for some reason. I don't know. I had to set up everything again from scratch.
Yeah, there's way too many prosecutors and police that think that Franz Kafka's The Trial is an instruction booklet.
Yeah. Well, it just goes back to the Jan 6 hearing.
Yep. Or like I said, that lady with the Heritage Foundation where she accuses her of perjury. It's like, you said this. Well, actually, what I really said was this. I have the ground. You can't interrupt me. Well, all I was doing was responding, I have the ground. You can't interrupt me. Like, even that person next to her, who I don't know what
the other one was saying was like, well, she asked her a question. Why can't she answer? You don't have the chair. You don't have the floor. It's not your turn to talk. It's not your turn to talk. And so he kept saying, point of order, which means that there's something that the chair needs to rule on about the proceedings. It's like, what's your point of order? It's like, well, she should be allowed to ask the question. That's not a proper point of order.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the worst part is if you look in the comments, how many people were like, oh yeah, she's so brave not letting that liar, be able to spread her lies anymore. She's just so, she owned her and all that. Yeah, whatever.
No, you didn't. Yeah. Yeah, not
it's
letting
easy
a
to make
person
it appear like you own someone if you can ask them whatever you want, accuse them of whatever you want, and then stop them from responding.
Yeah. Yeah, it's no different than those people that said, I made this guy rage quit a debate. That means I won. When what most likely happened is that you were doing such circular reasoning and being such that the person was like, you know what? Screw this. I'd have a much more productive time talking to a brick wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even worse, the both Sam Cedar and Tom Hartman have been caught doing, where they'll hang up on someone and then claim that, oh, well, they hung up. I guess oh, look how great we were. They didn't have anything to say. Ha, ha, ha. They hung up. No. No, it was the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, that's why if I'm going to leave a debate or a discussion because I think I'm not getting anywhere, that's why I always make it pretty clear, I'm not leaving because you won. I'm leaving because it's clear we're getting nowhere and, I've got better things to do. If I sit here and argue with here, we'll be here till till the second coming of Jesus or whatever. And I don't have that time. I've got a life. I'll, keep staying in here is just going to keep me getting angry. I'm not going to bother.
Oh yeah, they'll do that too. You get understandably outraged at something ridiculous, and they're like, "Oh, see him? He's just an angry person. He's just so emotional. He can't think, logically or anything like that." And they'll use it against you.
Yep.
Prosecutors pull that shit all the time because they'll try to get someone riled up on the stand in cross, and if they do get them riled up, they'll say to the jury, aha, remember that outburst on the stand? That's an emotionally unstable person, and why were they so emotional? What they were trying to hide and all that. And if they don't rise to them and they stay perfectly rational, they were like, they then in closing they're telling the jury
he's a psychopath.
Anyone would have gotten riled up at that. You and I could have gotten riled up at that. You see what an unfeeling psychopath they are?
Yep, they do it. That's actually what happened to the lady, the Australian lady whose child was killed by a dingo. The suspicion is, oh, she's not acting like a typical mother. She's not crying every 5 seconds, and she's not constantly whining and crying about how she lost her baby. It's like everyone reacts differently to tragedy,
Yeah.
And that's another thing too.
If someone is going to pretend to be grieving right after it happens, that's when they're more likely to cry, because take it from someone who's been through it. When that happens, you can't cry for a while because you're in shock, you're in denial.
Yeah.
But those psychos will fucking use it against you. And that's why it always pisses me off to see that, because if you've been through that, and if you felt that, seeing that exploited just makes you want to go nap violation all over them.
Yeah. I mean, hell, when that incident happened to me, I legitimately, I was an emotional wreck, but I didn't break down and start crying until well after, the situation was over and the police had already arrived. For a while, all I do remember is I was just looking at my hand saying, oh my God, what have I done? And I'm just looking around like, what happened? What just happened? Is this really happening? And then finally, once everything's calmed down, that's when, I broke down because I realized, oh my God, what just happened? Why'd this happen to me?
That's why it really pissed me off when all of these people were making fun of Kyle Rittenhouse after he had that anxiety attack on the stand. It's like, what is wrong with you people? I don't have anxiety myself, but there are people very close to me who do. And I know what it's like. And man, it just makes me want to punch them in the face when they do stuff like that.
I will say though, Kyle Rittenhouse has been really cool about it. He actually used his own video of him crying, to make fun of a politician, if I recall correctly.
But yeah, like there was they did a lot of prep work to get him on the stand, and apparently it took a while just going through it to stop him from doing that, every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I mean he's going to have PTSD for the rest of his life over that.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I recall correctly, he has told people, he does get scared because there's still tons of people that think he's legitimately guilty, and
Yeah.
You gotta admit, though, even though it's highly discouraged, even though almost all attorneys will tell you to never take the stand, Kyle might be that one exceedingly rare exception where taking the stand actually helped him, because he did a damn good job with the prosecutor,
Well, I think the idea was, because that was what all the lawyers were saying, was like, why call him to the stand? You've got this one I think putting him on the stand wasn't for the jury, it was for the public.
Yeah,
because if he hadn't taken the stand, people would have had no idea what he is. And when you see him on the stand, you see a truly good person who is just so horrified at what they were put through and what they had to do.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, you know what's another funny comment is when the prosecutor tried to use an excuse, it's like, oh yeah, he got into a fight, with his sister's ex-boyfriend, which was a situation he had no involvement in and all that. That shows, he wants to get involved in other people's affairs. And there were like a lot of people from the comment section, like they're saying, listen, I'm from the South, and what we call standing up for a family relative when someone's mistreating them, we don't call that being an interventionist. We call that being a good family member.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we don't know what
I love how much ammo, no pun intended, Binger is given, because recently I was trying to talk sense to some lefties on Twitter who were saying, oh, well, I'm drawing a blank on the ammo, the hollow point. Oh, that's this horrible weapon of war that explodes inside the person and does all the damage and all this. And I just pointed out, I was like, if the hollow point is so terrible, then why did Binger try to say Kyle Rittenhouse was horrible for not using hollow points?
Another thing too, people, hollow points are banned.
Not in the U.S., they're not.
And what? Well, I mean, they're banned in war, as in if you're caught using them.
They're banned by the Hague Convention because they're idiots.
Yeah. Ironically, and I've actually heard this from some combat veterans, using full metal jacketed rounds actually increases the danger because, hollow point bullets do a lot of damage, but they're less likely to over-penetrate. But if you're using full metal jacketed rounds, they're going, they have a higher risk of over-penetrating. So it's like, you kill the bad guy, but you also hit the civilian behind him.
I wish, though, that the defense... I mean, it's hard to argue with the defense because they got the not guilty verdict. But it would have been great for the defense to have someone who was actually knowledgeable about guns to point out that the ammo he was using, the way they described it, that was practice ammo.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. He had the gun loaded with practice ammo because he was figuring that he wouldn't have to use it. I mean, if he had went there with the intent to kill people, he would have used stronger rounds, or he would have used hollow points or things like that. It would have been loaded with practice ammo.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, maybe they tried to do that, but it isn't unheard of, where the defense will call in an expert witness to try to explain the evidence, and they pull, the Scopes monkey trial saying, this has nothing to do with the case.
But no, they wouldn't have had to do that because Binger was basically testifying to that when he questioned him. And, it would have been part of their objection to say, no, this is not armor piercing. This was practice ammo. If they had
to be fair, though, again, to their defense, Binger was doing such a good job at destroying his own case that I'm pretty sure the attorneys were just thinking, there's literally nothing we can do. Binger's doing a better. Binger and his star witness,
just to twist the knife in.
Yeah. Like I still laugh at that.
It was practice ammo.
I still laugh at that one scene, where their star witness, Gutierrez, finally admits, it's like, I was trying to shoot Kyle, and like one of the assistant attorneys is just face palming himself as if saying, "We're fucked. We've lost this
that
case."
Wasn't Gutierrez. Gutierrez was the guy who shot it. You were talking about Grosskreutz.
Grosskreutz. I thought it was Gutierrez. Yeah. I know it began with G or something.
I call him Lefty because I'm a terrible person.
Yeah.
Because his right arm was blown. Which ordinarily I would be able to empathize with, because that is the same muscle that was severely damaged by the drunk driver in my accident. But in his case, fuck him. He was a murdering scum. He tried to murder Kyle, and we all know it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's video of him, filming himself, and you can clearly see him antagonizing, the quote unquote right wing people that he was there. It's like, oh, there's a bunch of Boogaloo boys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also, that other guy that he shot and killed, I think I know why that guy was violent, because judging by the way the guy's father was acting during that Zoom meeting hearing, it's like, yeah, I can see why your son became the way he is.
Yeah, that was Huber. Oh, my son couldn't do no way. Yeah, he never told his son no, never punished his son for doing anything wrong. Yeah. So he thought he could get away with anything.
Mr. Huber, you were damn lucky it occurred over Zoom, because that stuff he was pulling, if you were to do that in an actual courtroom, the judge would have been like, bailiff, arrest him, take him out, get him out of my courtroom, 1 day in jail for contempt of court.
Yeah. Do not flip a judge the bird.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the only reason why the judge didn't do anything, was because literally there was nothing he could really do,
Well, I mean, he could have kicked him off the Zoom call, but really, I mean, he probably didn't even see it, because I think at that point they had muted him anyway, because they did mute him because he kept interrupting.
Yeah, if I was a judge and I saw that, even if it was over a Zoom meeting, I would have said that. I've said, you're damn lucky we're not in a courtroom. If you were in a courtroom, I would have had the bailiff take you out right now. Mr. Huber, from henceforth on, you are forbidden from attending any of the trials or hearings coming up next.
Yeah.
At the very least, he would have been...
didn't see it. Also, Judge Schroeder seems to be a little more easygoing about stuff like that. I mean, he wouldn't have tolerated it in court, but I think, in the Zoom call, he was just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah, he was a rare case of a judge that actually cared about justice and all that, because I even remember, another thing that kind of made it clear that, they were going to lose the case was when the judge himself had to yell at Binger, saying all this kid was doing was protecting his constitutional rights, and you and I both know he has every right to do that. Basically.
Yeah. You can't attack him for trying to insist on his constitutional rights. And then he tried to get that other witness because he didn't know how to get the evidence to the court. So he contacted the defense team and get it through them. It's like, well, why'd you go straight to a lawyer? Why'd you have to do that? And it's like it's his right to go through a lawyer. And so, the judge had to talk to him like he was 4 years old or something. Did something bad on the playground.
Yeah. Despite what the OJ trial portrays it as, pleading the fifth is a valid thing, people.
Yep.
Yeah, so many people like to make fun of that expression because of its involvement with the OJ trial, but many lawyers have pointed out, listen, it's a legitimate thing, people. You have every right not...
The worst part is, it turns out that the prosecution had known all along who Jump Kick Man was, and didn't put him on the stand because he was pleading the fifth to everything.
Oh, yeah.
So someone they would have put up as their own witness kept it, and then they got on that other guy for pleading the fifth, and it's like, no.
Yeah, I mean,
knowing who Jump Kick Man was and not telling the defense. I mean, there's so many things that he should be disbarred for. Of course, he's not gonna be, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of petitions to get him disbarred.
Yeah, but he's not going to be.
I mean, hell, I remember you mentioning this, another reason why you could tell they didn't have a case against Kyle Rittenhouse is because one of the big people that was advocating for Rittenhouse to go to jail, was the lead prosecutor of Kenosha, but he didn't take the case.
Well, you've got the the district attorney. He kicked it down. You've got the deputy DA. She didn't want it. She kicked it down. Binger and Krause are like 2 of something like 20 assistant DAs. And they didn't have anyone to pass that, cheese eater on to.
I've heard some people do say that, like, if the main district attorney is very vocal about being tough on crime, but he won't take your case, and he's doing it to a lowly assistant, that's usually a sign he doesn't have anything on you and he's just trying to get it over with. Yeah. That's the thing, too, that should be brought up more often.
I'm trying to refresh the chat. The last one I see is JC talking about 3 felonies a day. I don't know if anyone's chatted any.
I wish it was brought up more. I wish it was brought up more often in trials. Although granted, it would probably be shot down if it brought it up. But I agree. You know, people should bring it up more often. You know, where the prosecutor is saying, you know, you committed a crime and we are going to punish you to the full extent of the law. And the defense attorney should say, yeah, Mr. Prosecutor, you offered my client a plea deal. If you think this guy is totally guilty, you got, you know, there's no denying beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's guilty. Why are you going for a plea bargain where he's only going to get like a year or so of probation instead of actually taking him to trial where if he's convicted, he'll go to jail for years? Don't you want him to be punished?
That's why I think plea bargains shouldn't be a thing. Yeah. Charge him with what you're going to charge him. And if he says, no, it wasn't this, but it wasn't murder, but it was manslaughter, then either take the manslaughter, try him for murder. Don't try to like do a deal or anything.
Yeah. And another way that could help end that, in my personal opinion, because this really is a bad thing, no piggybacking, which means, you know, like let's say you arrest a guy for armed robbery, don't just arrest him for robbery. Don't say, okay, we're going to charge you with armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, possession of a weapon with intent to do harm, this and that, fleeing a crime scene, resisting arrest. It's like, no, charge him with robbery and leave it at that. Because that's literally all they use that for. All they use that for is, you know,
all the stuff we're talking about. And I even talk about, was it on yesterday's podcast that I talked about bail again? But I've talked about that before. All this is stuff that falls disproportionately on poor and minorities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because you know, if I recall correctly, with the exception of some felonies, like, you know, they can't deny you bail. So what do a lot of places do if they don't want you to go free? They want to keep you in jail so you'll crack. They'll be like, okay, you can have bail. The bail's $10,000.
And we should have loser pays in this country, and that should also apply to prosecutor's office.
Oh yeah.
If the prosecutor tries you and you're not guilty, the prosecutor pays your defense team.
And your lost wages.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, that's another thing too that's messed up about the US prison system, is that if you are convicted of a crime, you know, there's nothing, you know, protecting you from debts and all that. And that's why some people do recidivist, is because, you know, when they get out, you know, they're still stuck with all this debt and no one's paying them anything, you know. And it's like, well, I was in prison for you know, a couple of years, you know, I'm a changed man now, but I can't afford to pay that right now. And it's like, doesn't matter, you gotta pay it or bad stuff's gonna happen.
Well, and they can't get a job because they got a conviction on their record.
Yeah, they can't get a job, you know, if it's a sex crime.
Basically, prisons are institutions of psychological torture, so they've probably got PTSD and all sorts of stuff from the experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's one thing about the bail, because they were like, we can't let them out on bail. They might, you know, commit a crime while they're out. Well, if you look at it, statistically, if you have them in pretrial detention, they're more likely to commit another crime when they get out than they were to have committed a crime if you let them out on bail.
Yeah.
Just from that additional jail time.
It's pretty funny, Shane, because I have a couple of Norwegian people, because, you know, Norway's, you know, legal system, you know, gets talked about a lot, and a lot of Norwegians I've talked to, they said, you know, the biggest problem with the portrayal of the Norwegian system is that people get it all wrong. Like people think, you know, Norway is like, oh, you're convicted of jail, we're going to send you to a 2-star hotel and give you a lollipop. It's like, no, basically the way the Scandinavian system often works is that it's all about redemption. It's about rehabilitating you and training you to be a productive member of society. It's basically, you committed a crime,
giving you job training, give you occupational skills, stuff like that.
Yeah, we're gonna train you so you don't have to be a crime and you can be a productive member of society. Whereas in the US and a lot of parts of the world, it's just, you know, retributive punishment, where it's, you committed a crime, so now you're gonna rot in this cell till you're 110 years old.
And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll have them, you know, apprentice to someone while they're still in prison, and just have them do, you know, supervised work for them so that they can get a job with them when they get out.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've seen videos from I've seen video, YouTubers, from ex-prisoners, ex-cons and all that, and they agree. It's like, that's the problem with the US prison system is that we lock them up in these dungeons. They're stuck in there, 23 hours a day, only let out, an hour a day, to go exercise and take a shower and eat. And it's like, we're not training them how to get jobs. We're not doing this. What are they supposed to do when they get out? There's nothing for them, when they get out. They lose everything.
There was I remember this story because of what happened. There was a jail in New York that tried that. And they were like, okay, you can learn a trade, become an apprentice, and come out on your own. And there was this one guy who wanted to be a barber. And I mean, they had interviewed him and talked about, before he was in jail, he did crimes because he thought, life had nothing to offer him. He had nothing to offer anyone else. He thought he was worthless and all of that. When he started working with this in jail, he started feeling good about himself for the first time. Really kind of inspiring. He cut the hair of his fellow inmates, apprenticed to a barber and got all of that. When he got out of jail, and all this training to become a barber and all of this so that he'd be ready to go. When he got released from jail, the first thing he did was applied for a barber's license from the state of New York, and the state of New York turned him down because he had a criminal record.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I think that's the problem, is that a lot of these sheriffs and prosecutors, they're stuck, with the retribution mentality where it's like, no, they committed a crime and I'm going to make them pay.
Yeah, they're scum and they need to be punished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
saw this,
and I really don't get. I mean, I can kind of see why they'd be that way with murderers and people like that, or even armed robbers.
Yeah.
Why would people be that way with drug addicts?
Yeah,
those are people
exactly.
who need treatment.
Yeah.
They need psychological help. They need someone to figure out what the underlying problem is and get them better.
Oh yeah, that's another misconception that my Norwegian friends have told me too, is that contrary to popular belief, we don't give every prisoner like a lollipop in a room with a 2-star hotel. Like, if there's legitimately a violent criminal who is completely psychopathic, he has no regrets, and if he's ever let go, he'll do it again. They've got facilities in place to house people like that. It's just that they recognize. It's just that they recognize that the overwhelming majority of criminals aren't like that. Most of them are, like you said, they're mentally ill people that need help, or they're just people that, went astray. They hung out with the wrong people, or they made bad decisions. And in those cases, the solution is, to train them, to teach them how not to find themselves in that situation again, so they don't recidivize and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with the prison system, is we treat every single criminal like they're a psychopathic, maniac getting ready to kill people, when the reality is most people aren't like that, I mean, I've heard funny stories.
By the way, being found not guilty by reason of insanity is not any kind of free ride. Because first of all, you'll be housed in a place that's arguably a lot worse than prison. Second, most people like that are housed for longer than they would have, been incarcerated if they'd been found guilty.
Yeah, so many people, there are so many people I meet that are like, oh, we have, a mental health problem because the government shut down all the institutions, why did we shut them down? Now we've got all these crazy homeless people. It's like, people, did you not watch the Geraldo expose of the biggest state mental institute ever?
Well, yeah, it's really understandable why they wanted those institutes shut down, but they didn't come up with something better.
Yeah.
They just kind of turned loose on the street, so that...
Well, to be fair, the people that were all for shutting down these state prisons, like, they weren't saying shut them all down and let them go. They were just saying, listen, we can't be keeping people like animals. We can't be keeping them in maximum security prisons. What we should do is be focusing on treatment and getting these people better and all that. And the state was like, nope, we'll just throw them in prison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll here's something else, and this is something that goes back to Jan 6. If you're held in pretrial detention for longer than you would have been sentenced if found guilty. And that's what's happening with a lot of these Jan 6 defendants. They've been in for whatever it is, 17, 18 months now, something like that, a year and a half since it happened. They've been held in pretrial detention, denied bail, most of them for misdemeanors that if they would have been convicted, they would have got 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, you let those people out. If you can't bring it to court by the time their sentence would have expired anyway, then you got nothing to say. We're just going to let them go.
Yeah, that should be the rule. The charges are dropped, and the DA in court has to pay you for everything.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, but that means the taxpayers have to pay for criminals. It's like, you're only a criminal only if you're found guilty.
Yep. Oh, that is something in yesterday's podcast. Listen to this. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot was all about, when criminals are arrested, they're arrested because they were shown guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. Yeah, they're guilty. It's like, no, that's a conviction in a court of law. Just an arrest, just an indictment is just probable cause. And at best, you've been indicted by a grand jury in a situation where you have no right to be in the room or have a lawyer in the room refuting the evidence. You know, the prosecutor can just say whatever he wants to say. They're not even public record. You know, that's why they say the grand jury will indict a ham sandwich, because all they ever hear is the prosecutor's side. So what else are they going to do?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, it reminds me of this one, 48-hour specials I saw, where a kid was accused of killing a man. Why? Because his friend dreamt about it, and he talked about how, oh yeah, I had all this, and the police were literally leading him, and the jury found him guilty based on that, and all their statements was, oh yeah, the look in the guy's eyes, clearly said, it's like, come on, man, confess, you know what you did. It's like, people, do you not know how psychology works?
Yeah.
And the sad thing too, and this is really what broke my heart, is that
this whole thing about, I know he was lying because his eyes moved up and to the left, and that means neurologically blah 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 blah, bullshit. Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
I mean, yeah, it's and the funny thing is that there was this one, cop show, I used to watch, like, it was a documentary series, and it was about this, he's retired now, but he was a police detective from that, and like, there was an interview with him, and he said one thing he really hates is that there's all those, pseudo mumbo jumbo, and people are becoming so reliant on these myths and lie detectors that it's like, listen, there are ways to tell if a person's lying, but police are losing that skill because they're like, oh yeah, we did this test, so that proves he's lying or telling the truth. It's like, no, the way. It's like, no,
well, it's not at all unusual, especially for defense attorneys, because they don't have, they don't have the resources that the powers that the prosecutor does. But they'll either learn a lot about body language themselves or have a body language expert look at witnesses to try and see if they're lying or not or whatever, or look at the jury to see, if they're accepting what a witness says or whatever. It's nothing you can use from an evidentiary standpoint. It's not that strong, but it can give you enough of an idea that it can help you know what's landing with the jury and what isn't, or how you should cross-examine a witness or things like that.
Well, the thing that this police detective was asked, because they asked him in the interview, it's like, well, if you can't tell, if someone, is lying or something with, like, physical traits and a brain scan, how do you tell if they're lying and all that? It's like, it's simple. You just talk to them. You look for inconsistencies or listen for details that nobody except the criminal could have known. Stuff like that, and people are losing that.
Sorry, had to deal with a troll.
Yeah. Hyperloop simping. People, that stopped being a thing years ago. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, 20
there are open projects in the world where they are actually building it.
Yeah.
I don't know what. Yeah.
But anyway, back to what we were saying. Yeah,
It's just
like,
part of the Musk derangement syndrome is what it is.
yeah. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, it's like, yeah, there are actual valid techniques that police, can use to help, catch criminals, but they're losing that because they're being taught, oh, you don't need that. You just got to, trust your gut and do all this and that and rely on these techniques. And it's like, no, they don't work. Or another good example, because I've actually seen this. You talk about the argument of incredulity. Well, and I think, it was like, that whole prosecutor's fallacy. Like, there's cases, where literally the prosecutor and the police are like, oh, we are absolutely certain that this person is guilty of the crime because we can't think of anything else that could have happened to the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it's like
any investigator worth his salt is going to tell you that there's a difference between evidence that can help you investigate and give you a lead and lead you in the right direction and evidence you can actually use in a court of law.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are two different things.
Yeah.
And a lot of these investigative tools, they're just meant to kind of give you an idea for a place maybe you might want to look.
Yeah,
They're not anything definitive.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, but yeah, I hate it with the prosecutor's fallacy because he brought it up, where it's not unheard for some prosecutors to say, it's like, listen, you are either guilty or you are the most unluckiest person in the whole world. It's like, that stuff happens.
Yeah. Someone is the unluckiest person in the world and he does not deserve to be put in jail for it.
Yeah, Yeah, like that woman who was convicted of killing her kids, even though it turned out she actually, and it was later proven, years later through medical study, that there actually is a genetic fault with some people that doesn't show up, but it causes them to have children that are much more susceptible to SIDS. It's tragic, yes, but it's nothing you have control over, but it didn't matter. And even though she was found innocent, it ruined her life, and she ended up dying because she developed a drinking and drug problem afterwards.
Yeah,
I forgot the name of her, but it was a big case in the UK.
Woman. It's horrible.
It happened. It happened. Yeah. Believe it or not, a similar thing happened with shaken baby syndrome. Like, you hear that all the time, and so many people. Yeah, and so many people were like that, and the people and if I recall correctly, people failed to realize the case that coined the term shaken baby syndrome. It was later found out that she wasn't guilty of killing the kid because it was later proven that that the injuries sustained from a baby weren't from shaking, but from a fall it had suffered days prior. That was accidental, and it was nobody's fault. Now, granted, we're not saying you should shake your children because they're annoying you, but
no, please don't.
Yeah,
because you can shake your baby and do some really, really horrible damage to it.
Oh yeah.
But there's no definitive diagnosis for death by shaken baby syndrome. That's not a thing.
Yeah, I mean,
you need like actual evidence that that's what happened.
Yeah, same thing. It's because, I was watching a documentary about that case and they had a doctor and people were asking them, it's like, well, do we know, how come we still haven't figured out what the cause for SIDS is? And the doctor who's a medical expert says, because the practicality is that SIDS is not actually, a disease or anything. It's just a term we use, It's the same thing when we tell people, oh, your grandfather died of natural causes. It's like, he probably died from like a heart attack or something, but there's tons of things that could have killed him,
Yeah, it's like we have no idea why this person died. That happens a lot.
Yeah, it could have been, I mean, like that doctor flat out said, there's a lot of things that can cause a baby to die, in their crib. It could have been, they had a sleep apnea attack and their brain wasn't developed enough to wake them up. It could have been, a defective nerve that fired off. It's just so many things could have happened. And, going back to that woman, as it was demonstrated, there's now evidence that shows, unfortunately, some people do have faulty genes that can be passed on to their kids that make them prone to stuff like that. And it's tragic, but it's not worthy throwing them to jail for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of biology. When we were in biology class, and there was a documentary about genetic diseases we were watching, and there was this one woman who was going through a lot of trauma because every time she tried to have a baby, the baby would live for like a year or so, then it would suddenly develop this respiratory syndrome and die, and they couldn't figure out why. Finally, one doctor decided to test her genes, and he said, "Well, we found out why you're having difficulty raising a kid, and I'm sorry, but a lot of your egg cells are producing genes that have the genetic gene that causes Tay-Sachs disease. I think that's what it's called."
Yeah.
But it was able to help her because there is a way you can have kids with Tay-Sachs. It's complicated medical mumbo jumbo. I'm sure
the great thing is if a lot of these promises about CRISPR can be realized, where you can actually fix the genetic defects early on.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting good at that,
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Michael Malice.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not terrible. He's not someone I give the Lord Killian treatment to, probably, but just not a big fan.
It kind of reminds me of the movie Galaga, and there was a lot of people who were reviewing Galaga that said, there's actually a perfectly logical there's actually a perfectly understandable reasoning for why they wouldn't want someone, who's prone to medical issues to be on a mission to Titan.
That's true, but I mean, the point of the movie was that they were really taking it too far, and they were just assuming that just because you were a quote-unquote invalid, that automatically meant that you were defective.
Yeah, I mean, that's what
the main character
point
proved. He was like, no, it doesn't, because he did it with far greater hurdles than anyone else had.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if I recall correctly, that was the whole point of the film. The whole point of the film, wasn't that, he was prone to genetic, disorders. It was because he was conceived naturally and not, done. Everyone assumed, oh yeah, he's a mutt. He's not perfect. So, he's probably not going to do any better.
Yep.
And we do see that kind of behavior. Like we see it a lot with dogs, I mean, because I've actually saw one geneticist, review Gattaca or whatever it was called. Was it Galaga or Gattaca?
Gattaca. You can remember because all of the letters in the title are A, C, T, and G.
Yeah,
which are the initials of the nucleotides in DNA.
Yeah. And I remember watching a geneticist review Gattaca, and it says, granted, maybe that's what the film's trying to imply, but one of the biggest misconceptions people have about genetic manipulation is that we can make perfect humans by manipulating them. It's like, nope, you cannot get rid of all bad genes, and sometimes even positive genes have a negative consequence to them,
Well, and that was the point of, who was it? Was it Uma Thurman, who was Ethan Hawke's love interest in that movie? I forget who it was.
It's been a while since I saw
But that was the point. She was someone who was genetically engineered, but she had heart problems, and she was constantly worried about it. And that's what Ethan Hawke's character said to her. They've got you looking so hard for the tiniest little flaw that sooner or later that's all you see.
Yeah. Yes, I know Galaga was a space shooter. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that's the game. You're totally not flying an X-wing, but it looks like an X-wing.
I love that game.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and to be fair, the whole thing with Gattaca, we actually kind of see that with a lot of animals like dogs. There's so many things we do for dogs, that we ultimately realize that a lot of those good genes also come with bad genes. And then you get dogs
they come in suites.
Yeah.
And a gene that can have a good effect in one context can have a bad effect in another. So there's a gene that a lot of black people have because in Africa there's a lot of malaria going around. It gives them a resistance to malaria, but on the flip side, it also can result in sickle cell anemia.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about that. One benefit of having sickle cell disease is that you're resistant and in some circumstances completely immune to malaria and various other protozoan infections. But yeah, it comes with the downside that you're going to live a miserable life.
If you're hetero, I think if you're heterozygous, if one chromosome has the allele and the other one doesn't, then I think you get the resistance to malaria without having sickle cell because the other gene can compensate for that. It's if you're homozygotic with the allele that you have the full on sickle cell anemia, and it's a big problem.
Yeah, I mean.
So it's just funny the way genes work.
That's the thing. Yeah, but that's what the geneticist was saying. He says that's the thing that the world of Gattaca, kind of forgot is that genes come in pairs. They're not like people always talk about how we found a gene, that does this, when the actual term is we found a set of genes because they come in pairs. Because if a gene only came single and alone, it's not going to do anything because it's an incomplete gene.
Well, it's still a complete gene. But it's just if you have two copies of the gene, they can kind of work together. But that's it's sickle cell, SICKLE, like the thing the death carries, that big scythe type thing. But what was I saying
sickle cell,
before
not single cell.
Yeah, what was I saying before that? I forget what I was saying. But I remember now. We were talking about the pairs because you have pairs of chromosomes. The one exception to that is if you're a male, your sex chromosomes are XY, and so you have a lot of genes on the X chromosome that aren't corresponding on the Y chromosome, and that's why a lot of things like male pattern baldness, color blindness, and things like that occur more often in men than they do in women because women have a second X chromosome that can compensate for it. On the other hand, a lot of the things that make us male are genes that are in the Y chromosome that aren't in the X chromosome.
Yeah. So. And JC advertised, it's sickle cell anemia. Single cell anemia is where your blood where the cells in your blood have absolutely no personality, and therefore nobody wants to date them.
Yeah, they just live in their mother's basement.
Yeah. Hey, I live in my mom's basement.
Point taken.
Yeah. Yeah, then again, you'd be surprised how many people live with their parents, up until a pretty advanced age, there's that joke that says
the example I'd always use is I tell them I have a friend in Greensboro who at the time was like in his 30s and still lived at home with his mom. And they're like, now what do you think about that? And like, oh, well, he must be a loser. He's like, no, she's very sick and infirmed and he's taking care of her. Because everyone else in her family abandoned her. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He was all she
Or
had.
it could be... Or it could be like I saw this one sitcom, I can't remember it, where like this guy's dating a girl and the girl's like, you still live with your mother? And he's like, no, it's worse. She lives with me. Yeah.
Yep. If it's your house and mom's moved in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my house.
A lot of times that happens. I mean, well, and this is what my sister and my mom did because my mom's a widow, my sister's divorced. Of course, we're grown. Her kids are all grown. They had just two big houses that they just didn't really need. And they were paying like all this in property taxes on it, especially since my mom's house, they rezoned it as commercial on her. So that just really, upped the property taxes. And they were saying that her property was worth $1 million. It was not worth $1 million. She did not get $1 million from selling it. But what they did was they sold their respective houses and got one together. Nice big house. Basically, my sister lives upstairs in kind of her own little, it's got its own like kitchenette and everything. And then mom has her own little, bedroom, bathroom area. And there's another bedroom there in the guest area and got, a common living room and kitchen and all that. Really nice house that they got together.
Yeah.
And that's good because they have they have each other. They can, because my mom.
It's just another lie you've been told. You've been told.
Yeah.
You're told. You got to go to college, or else you're going to be a loser living in your parents' basement. And I saw a funny parody of that where a guy does all that. He goes to college, he gets all that, and what does he do? He works at a really demoralizing desk job, for only like $9 an hour, and he has his own place, and it's a crappy apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's plenty of legitimate reasons to live with a parent.
Yeah. I'm autistic, so the reason why I still live with my mom.
My mom's 83, so it's kind of nice that there's someone with her. I mean, my mom's pretty healthy and she gets around pretty good. But especially when COVID hit, my mom is not in that age group where you want to get COVID. So it was good that, my sister was able to, do all of that, make sure she had everything she needed, and we all made sure she was protected from that.
Mm.
But I mean, she's really healthy. She gets around pretty good. She does yoga and all that.
Yeah, I know you've talked. Yeah, you talked about your family before and about how your own family is proof, that the free market can work, because you mentioned your grandma, was put in a situation, which was, according to a lot of SJWs, that's the worst case scenario. Meaning, if you're stuck in that solution, unless someone comes out and bails you, you're dead.
Yeah, she had my mom at 16 years old at the height of the Depression.
Yeah,
and she was from a poor farming family. They didn't have anything. The dad was out of the picture. There was no child support. There was no welfare for single mothers. There was just, the best that my Nana could do. She went to beauty school and became a manicurist at a barber shop, not exactly raking it in, but she scrimped and saved and raised my mom. And there's 2 points to this story. One, they never did without health insurance. They always had health insurance. 2, my mom was part of the first generation in that family that went to college. She went to college just on what my Nana had saved up and what she got working in a summer job, got her 4-year degree, got a math degree, a bachelor's, without going into debt. No debt. And then government started helping people. They started fixing healthcare. They started helping people go to college. And now look at the result.
Yeah. Yeah. So dad was out of the picture, huh? So you knew your Nana, but you never knew who your pappy was.
Well, no, we ended up knowing him. I don't think Mom ever met him until she was an adult, but he had ended up marrying another woman. They had 3 kids together. And so I visited him several times and we got to know him, but he struggled with depression, and his daughters said that, the fact that he had basically abandoned my mom was probably what did most of it.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's another, to be fair, that's actually a good, lesson, like, a big misconception, that a lot of people says that when a guy ditches, a girl who he knocked up, it's because he's a scumbag and all that. It's like, no, it's contrary to what some people think, men go through, physical and emotional distress too when there's a pregnancy involved.
Well, and they were kids, they were teenagers, they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm pretty sure your pappy, wasn't that scumbag, that hits your Nana and quit her. I'm pretty sure, like you said, it was probably an accident. It was probably an accident, and he didn't know what to do, and he's just like, I don't know what to do. I can't do this, and just ran off.
It was one of those cases where it was a shotgun wedding. My mom said she didn't think they ever spent a single night together as husband and wife.
Yeah.
I mean, people make mistakes like that when they're young.
Yeah.
And then you grow up and you mature and you have regrets and...
Yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, just from... I remember Nana doing things like when she'd use a paper towel. If it wasn't like... it wasn't like crudted up with food or everything. If she just wiped something off with it, she'd wash it out in the sink, put a little bit of detergent in it, wash it out, and lay it out to dry so it could be used again. That's the sort of thing she learned to do in the Depression.
Oh, yeah.
That's the sort of thing, just squeezing the value out of every penny she could.
Yeah. I mean, hell, that's actually the reason why I've heard stories of, like, some people, having grandparents, that can eat really, really bad food that's gone off. And that's because, they grew up during the Depression where they couldn't waste food. So they literally had to teach themselves techniques, to recover the food. Like, it won't taste good, but it won't make you sick either.
Well, this is long before the Depression, but, back before refrigeration and everything else, the reason why, Cajun food and all this other food is like really incredibly spicy is to cover up the taste of meat when it starts to go bad.
Yeah,
because you only had like at most a week to eat it. I mean, we probably wouldn't eat anything that had been laying out for a couple of days without being in the fridge.
Yeah, but I mean, the YouTube channel Townsend and Sons, that does, 17th to 18th century cooking. They asked him, what's one recipe that he would never do? And he says there's quite a few recipes, but one recipe we're definitely not going to do is that there's literally a recipe that says, how do you recover meat when it's stinky and moldy and rotten?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's something else that's in 12 Years a Slave, because, they got everything that was discarded, and it really sounded like the food they got was just like really disgusting. And they had to figure out all sorts of ways that they could prepare it and just eat, as much as they could possibly salvage from it.
Yeah. Yeah, because from what I've read, there are techniques, to salvage, rotten food, so like, it's not going to taste good, but at least you can eat it without getting sick. But the reason we don't do them anymore is because there's no need to,
Yeah, I mean, this is what people are saying. Oh, the poor are getting poorer. We're just... No, the poor are far richer today. Because they talk about, the great prosperity of the 50s and how much worse things are today. Things aren't worse today. Things aren't increasing, as far as economic development at the same rate they were in the 50s. This is true. But we didn't slide back. Look at the shows from the 50s. Look at, like, the Honeymooners. The way a typical family lived. They didn't have a refrigerator. They had an ice box. The Iceman had to come and deliver ice in the morning, and that meant you really couldn't keep anything overnight, which is also why you had a milkman delivering milk every morning, because you didn't have a way to keep milk fresh overnight.
Yep.
They didn't have a phone. Every time they wanted to make a call, they had to holler up at their upstairs neighbor, lowered down their phone so they could use it.
Yeah, there was actually, we watched this in media study class. There was an episode of The Honeymooners, which is where the wife wants to get a phone, but the husband doesn't want to get one, and the wife wants it because, it's going to be convenient. If she needs to call to get something, she can just call it on the phone. But the husband's like, no, I don't want a phone. I'll just be bothered. Heck, not having a phone prevented me from doing a double shift because my boss couldn't call me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, phones weren't cheap. I mean, the phone company gave you the phone for free, but the bills were really high. And how you have an area code? Yeah. When I was growing up, and even when I was a teenager, that area code meant something. Because if you had to dial an area code to get out, if you had to dial more than 7 digits, that was long distance, and you were charged for that.
Yeah.
And especially if you had to dial outside your area code. And then when they broke up AT&T, everyone was like, "Oh, this is going to be horrible. You call long distance, you won't be able to hear anything, and it'll be so expensive." It was the exact opposite. When you started being able to have your choice of AT&T or MCI or some of the other long distance carriers, they started competing on price. They had services like, 10-10-220 was one that had a lot of advertisements where you didn't even have to sign a contract. You just dial 10-10-220 and then the number. And you could call someone anywhere in the country for 10 cents a minute. Imagine that, as cheap as 10 cents a minute.
And as John Stossel pointed out, when free markets took over the phone industry, you could now, if someone called you but you missed the call, you could actually have an answering machine.
Oh yeah. You couldn't have that before because you didn't have that little RJ11 connector that you can. It was hardwired into the thing. There was no plug. It was just hardwired in.
Yeah, he mentioned, that, the technology to create phone recorders, for missed calls existed, but the monopoly didn't want them and they didn't want to install them. And in some circumstances, you could actually face a fine if you tried to put it in because that would be declared installing a foreign device. By the way, some people use the breakup of AT&T saying, "Oh, see, the government can fix markets and end monopolies." It's like, but when I researched it, it wasn't,
that was the Telecommunications Act that created the monopoly.
Yeah. And from what I understand,
if you remember when they were talking about net neutrality and regulating the internet under Title II, that was the same title of the same act that gave AT&T that monopoly for 40 years. That's what they wanted to do to the internet.
Yeah, from what I read, contrary to popular belief, it wasn't the government, interfering with AT&T. All it was them doing was saying, okay, AT&T, we're not gonna, give you all these political privileges anymore.
And it wasn't even Congress did it. It was the courts that were like, no, okay, this is ridiculous. No, you can't do it. We're banging the gavel. You're not, no.
Yeah, you can't sue people for setting up, competitive industries. You can't, you can't, get politicians to say, "Oh, this isn't zoned for all that."
I mean, it's too bad they didn't do that for local phone coverage. You had all the baby bells, they were called, Southern Bell, Western Bell, and all those. Yeah. And we still got those monopolies around today for local phones.
Kind of reminds me of another South Park episode, and it was the one that was making fun of the cable, and they missed out on a perfectly good joke that they could have done when South Park is complaining about how all the alternatives are terrible. What should have happened is the CEO of the cable company should have says, "Oh, why don't you set up your own cable company?" "Oh yeah, that's right. You can't do that. It's illegal."
Yeah.
No joke. A lot of people complain about how capitalism created, the cable monopoly. Well, there's a pretty good point. Try making your own cable company. Get some tech people together and make a cable company. You know what's going to happen? Within a week, you're going to get an email from the FCC saying, "Oh, nope, you're an unauthorized cable company. Cease and desist."
Or you'll get it from, in our case, Charter is the only cable company allowed in Lincoln County.
Yeah.
So, yeah, even if you wanted to, the county's going to be like, "Nope, you can't do that because we're only letting Charter be cable in Lincoln County."
Yeah, people fail to realize Comcast, isn't a monopoly because it buys everything. It's a monopoly because many governments that are saying, "Yep, the only provider that's allowed in this area is Comcast."
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, it's after 10, so I guess we gotta close this off. Any final thoughts?
Nope.
I'm gonna try refreshing this chat one more time just to make sure no one's saying anything. The last thing I got in Twidget was the 3 felonies a day one. Last one on the screen is JC talking about sickle. I don't know. I don't know if it's malfunctioning. I'm sorry if I'm missing all sorts of chats, but it's been great doing this. I've missed this. I've been wanting to do this.
Yep.
It's great that I finally got it. So
stupid real life.
Yeah. And stupid YouTube and its stupid strikes.
Yeah.
Because there was no reason to give me that strike. And they appealed it and they still wouldn't. No, it's still on my channel. That means if I get another bogus strike, it'll be 2 weeks that I won't be able to upload or live stream. And I can't contact anyone. I can't figure out how to contact anyone, to say, "Hey, wait a minute, can you please take this off? It's not supposed to be on my channel. My appeal was successful." But I don't know. If you're a little channel like me, you're screwed. They don't care about you, which is why it would be awesome if you all went to donate.bogosity.tv and help me out any way you can. And of course, like and share my videos. Comment everywhere you can. Thanks, Chris, for joining me again.
Yep.
And thanks, Executioner, for stopping by as long as he could. Thanks, everyone in the chat. It was kind of quiet, but it was still fun. And, of course, thanks, everyone, for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.